I've been warden of Mill Haven Penitentiary for 12 years, and I thought I'd seen everything these concrete walls could hold. Murderers, thieves, madmen, they all blur together after a while. But nothing prepared me for what started happening 3 weeks ago, when she first appeared in cell block D. It was Officer Martinez who came running to my office that Tuesday morning, face pale as winter fog. He stammered about seeing a woman in the restricted wing, a place where no female had set foot in decades. I followed him down the echoing corridors, our footsteps sharp against the stone, expecting to find some elaborate prank or security breach. But cell 47 stood empty, its door sealed tight with rust older than my tenure here. The air hung thick with something I couldn't name. Not quite perfume, not quite decay. Martinez swore he'd seen her clearly. A young woman in a tattered white dress, standing motionless behind the bars. When I pressed him for details, his voice cracked like a schoolboy's. She had no eyes, Warden, just holes where they should have been. I dismissed it then, blamed it on stress and too many double shifts. But the reports kept coming. Guards whispered of glimpsed figures in their peripheral vision, always vanishing when they turned to look. The temperature in certain corridors dropped without explanation, leaving frost on the walls in summer heat. Then Officer Henderson died. They found him in the morning, slumped over his desk in the guard station. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just gone, with his glasses shattered on the floor beside him. The coroner ruled it cardiac arrest, though Henderson was only 34, and healthy as a racehorse. I might have believed it, if not for the expression frozen on his face. Pure terror. 2 days later, it was Sergeant Phillips. Another heart attack, another pair of broken glasses. This time, Phillips had managed to activate the security camera before he died. The footage showed him backing against the wall, hands raised defensively, eyes wide with horror. But the camera saw nothing else, just Phillips, alone in his terror, until he collapsed. That's when I started digging through the prison archives, searching for anything that might explain what was happening. The old records were water damaged and yellowed, stored in boxes that hadn't been touched in decades. Most were mundane: transfer papers, disciplinary reports, budget allocations. But buried deep in a file marked 1904, I found something that made my blood turn to ice. The handwriting was spidery, formal in that old-fashioned way. It detailed a special arrangement between Warden Cornelius Blackwood and certain unnamed parties. A young woman named Elena Vasquez was to be imprisoned quietly, with no official record, no trial, no questions asked. The payment was substantial. According to the document, Eleanor had been a seamstress who'd witnessed something she shouldn't have. A murder committed by the mayor's son. Rather than risk a trial, they had her declared insane and locked away. The final entry, dated 6 months later, was brief. EV died during the night. Natural causes. Body disposed of per agreement. But there was more. Warden Blackwood had worn wire-rimmed spectacles, a distinctive feature, mentioned in several newspaper articles I found from that era. He'd been praised as a reformer, a man who brought order to Mill Haven's chaos. The articles painted him as a pillar of the community, beloved by all. They never mentioned Elena Vasquez. Armed with this knowledge, I began to notice patterns. Every man who died wore glasses. Every death occurred in areas of the prison built before 1920. And always, there were reports of a woman in white appearing just before the attacks. She was hunting, I realised. Hunting men who reminded her of the warden who'd stolen her life. I should have transferred every guard who wore glasses immediately. I should have cleared those cell blocks and sealed them permanently. But I was proud, stubborn, convinced I could handle whatever ghost story was plaguing my prison. I was wrong. Last night, I was working late in my office when the temperature plummeted. My breath came out in visible puffs as frost began forming on the windows. The fluorescent lights flickered and dimmed, casting dancing shadows across the walls. That's when I saw her reflection in my computer screen. Elena Vasquez stood behind me, her white dress hanging in tatters, her feet hovering inches above the floor. Where her eyes should have been were hollow sockets, dark and infinite. Her mouth opened in a silent scream that I felt rather than heard, a sound that vibrated through my bones. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My glasses, my cursed glasses, felt heavy on my face, marking me as one of them. One of the men who wore the same badge of authority as the warden who'd murdered her. She raised one translucent hand, pointing directly at me. "You know," she whispered, her voice like wind through dead leaves. "You know what he did." The lights went out completely. In the darkness, I heard footsteps, not on the floor, but in the air, circling me like a predator. The temperature continued to drop until my tears began to freeze on my cheeks. I wanted to run, to scream, to tear the glasses from my face and throw them as far as possible, but I couldn't move. She held me there in that chair, trapped by terror and guilt and the weight of a century-old injustice. Because I did know. I knew what Warden Blackwood had done, and I knew that every man she'd killed had been innocent of her murder, but guilty of wearing the symbol of authority that had destroyed her. "Please," I managed to whisper. "I'm not him. I didn't hurt you." Her laugh was like glass breaking in an empty room. "You wear his face," she said, drifting closer, until I could smell the grave dirt that clung to her dress. "You sit in his chair. You hold his power over the lives of others." I felt her cold fingers brush against my temples, felt my glasses sliding from my face. The moment they hit the floor and shattered, warmth flooded back into the room. The lights flickered on. Eleanor was gone. But I know she's still here, somewhere in these walls, waiting for the next man in glasses to cross her path. I've ordered all eyewear to be replaced with contacts, though I can't explain why to my staff. They think I've lost my mind, and maybe I have, because now I understand that some injustices are too great to be buried, too terrible to be forgotten. Elena Vasquez died in this prison for the crime of witnessing truth, and now truth is all she has left. She'll keep killing until someone acknowledges what was done to her, until someone pays for the sin of looking the other way. I've written up a full report about Elena's case, documenting everything I found in those old files. Tomorrow, I'll contact the authorities, the Historical Society, anyone who might listen. Her story deserves to be told. Her name deserves to be remembered. But tonight I'm going home to burn my spare glasses and pray that acknowledgement is enough. Because if it isn't, if she decides that knowing her story makes me as guilty as those who buried it, then I may not live to see her justice done. The walls of Millhaven Penitentiary have kept many secrets over the decades, but some secrets refuse to stay buried, and some ghosts refuse to rest until the living remember the names of the forgotten dead. I've been the lighthouse keeper at Widow's Point for 8 years now, following in my father's footsteps, like so many generations before me. The isolation never bothered me, just me, the endless ocean, and the ships that depend on my light to guide them safely to shore. But 3 months ago, everything changed when I found that old music box in the cellar. It was tucked behind a stack of mouldering supply crates, wrapped in oilcloth that crumbled at my touch. The music box itself was beautiful, carved rosewood with delicate silver inlay depicting dancing figures. When I opened it, a tiny ballerina spun to a haunting melody I'd never heard before. Engraved on the inside lid were the words, "For my dearest Lily, may you dance forever, Papa." I'd never heard of any Lily connected to this lighthouse, though records from the 1890s were spotty at best. The previous keeper, my great-grandfather Edmund, had kept meticulous logs until 1897, when his entries became erratic and brief. After that year, the handwriting changed entirely. Different keepers, different men, but none mentioned a daughter named Lily. That first night after finding the music box, I was startled awake by the sound of dancing, soft footsteps moving in rhythm across the floor above me, accompanied by that same haunting melody. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed the spiral stairs to the lamp room, but found nothing except the massive Fresnel lens rotating silently in its housing. The dancing continued every night after that, always between midnight and 3 in the morning. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, a flash of white fabric, a shadow that moved wrong, the outline of a small figure twirling just beyond the reach of my lamplight. But when I turned to look directly, there was nothing there. Then the ship started missing the harbour. Captain Morrison was the first to report it. His cargo vessel, the Mary Catherine, had been following my light when it suddenly seemed to shift position, leading him toward the rocky shoals instead of the safe channel. He managed to correct course just in time, but he swore the light had moved. Like someone was dancing with it, he told me over the radio, his voice shaken. I checked the lighthouse mechanism obsessively after that, but everything was in perfect working order. The light rotated on its prescribed pattern, sweeping across the water every 10 seconds exactly. Yet more captains began reporting the same phenomenon, a dancing light that lured them toward danger instead of safety. That's when I started researching the lighthouse's history more thoroughly. In the county archives, buried in a stack of newspaper clippings, I found what I was looking for. The headline from October 15th, 1897, made my blood run cold. Lighthouse keeper's daughter perishes in tragic fall. The article was brief but devastating. 8-year-old Lily Ashworth had been found at the base of the lighthouse, her neck broken from a fall down the spiral stairs. Her father, Edmund Ashworth, claimed she'd been sleepwalking, something she'd done frequently since her mother's death the previous winter. The coroner ruled it accidental death, but there was another clipping, smaller, and dated a week later. A letter to the editor from a fisherman who'd been offshore that night. He claimed to have seen lights moving erratically in the lighthouse just before dawn and heard what sounded like a child screaming. When he'd rowed closer to investigate, everything had fallen silent. The final piece of the puzzle came from Edmund's personal effects, donated to the Historical Society decades after his death. Among his belongings was a journal with entries that painted a very different picture of that October night. Edmund hadn't been sleeping when Lily fell. He'd been drinking, as he had every night since his wife's death. According to his tortured confessions, written in shaking handwriting, Lily had begged him to stop drinking, to play with her, to let her help tend the light, as she used to do with her mother. In his drunken rage, he'd shoved her away, sent her stumbling backward toward the stairs. The sound of her small body tumbling down the iron steps had sobered him instantly. But it was too late. Edmund had lived with that guilt for only 3 more months before taking his own life, throwing himself from the same gallery where his daughter had fallen. The lighthouse had been abandoned for nearly a year before my family took over the position, and the truth had died with the man who caused it. Now I understood why the ships were being led astray. Lily wasn't trying to help them. She was trying to recreate the chaos of that terrible night. The night her father's neglect had cost her everything. She was making the light dance because dancing was all she'd ever wanted to do, and now it was all she could do. The manifestations grew stronger after I learned the truth. I'd find the music box open in the morning, its melody playing even though I'd closed it the night before. Frost formed on the lighthouse windows in the shape of tiny handprints, always at child height, and the dancing became more violent, more desperate. Last week, the cargo ship Atlantic Dawn nearly foundered on Devil's Teeth rocks because the lighthouse beam had spiralled and spun like a drunken dancer, confusing their navigation completely. 3 lives were almost lost because of a ghost's endless waltz with grief and abandonment. I knew I had to do something, But what do you say to the spirit of a child whose father killed her through neglect and rage? How do you apologise for the sins of men you never knew? For a tragedy that happened a century before your birth? The answer came to me 2 nights ago, during the worst manifestation yet. The entire lighthouse was shaking, the beam carving wild patterns across the sky as every ship within 20 miles reported navigation failures. I climbed to the lamp room and found her there, not just a glimpse or a shadow, but Lily herself. She was exactly as I'd imagined from the newspaper descriptions, small for 8 years old, with dark ringlets and a white nightgown that billowed around her as she spun. But her eyes were holes of pure darkness, and her mouth was open in a silent scream that had lasted over a century. "Lily," I called over the wind that somehow howled inside the enclosed space. "I know what happened to you. I know about your father." She stopped dancing, her terrible gaze fixed on me. When she spoke, her voice was like the cry of gulls over winter waves. "He promised to dance with me. He promised to let me help with the light." "I know," I said, stepping closer, despite every instinct screaming at me to run. "He broke his promises. He hurt you when he should have protected you." Her form flickered like candlelight in the wind. "I keep the light dancing now. I dance for all the ships, forever and ever, just like he said I never could." "But you're hurting people, Lily. Good people who don't deserve to die for your father's sins." For a moment, her terrible expression softened, and I saw the frightened child beneath the vengeful spirit. "I just wanted to dance with Papa. I wanted to help make the light beautiful." That's when I understood. She wasn't trying to destroy ships out of malice. She was trying to make the lighthouse light dance, because dancing was beautiful, and beauty was what she'd been denied in life. In her child's understanding, she was trying to help. "Would you like to dance with me instead?" I asked, extending my hand toward her translucent form. "I promise I won't leave you alone anymore." The wind died instantly. The lighthouse beam steadied its rotation, and for the first time in over a century, Lily smiled. She placed her ghostly hand in mine, cold as winter fog, but real enough to feel, and we danced together in the lamp room as the light swept its steady pattern across the sea. Not the wild, chaotic spinning that had endangered ships, but a gentle waltz that made the beam seem to pulse with warmth. When dawn broke, she faded away, but not into the angry darkness I'd seen before. She dissolved like morning mist, peaceful at last. The music box sits on my desk now, its lid open, the tiny ballerina spinning to her eternal song. But the melody sounds different somehow. Not haunting anymore, but hopeful. And every night, at midnight, I climb to the lamp room and dance alone for a few minutes, keeping my promise to a little girl who just wanted her father to love her enough to share one dance. The ships find safe harbour now. The light burns steady and true. And sometimes when the fog rolls in thick from the Atlantic, I swear I can hear the distant sound of laughter carried on the wind. The laughter of a child who finally got her dance.